what is this sound thing anyway? And I was trying to find the answer, and I tried to figure it out for a while, but then after that I decided I look up the definition of sound. And what was the definition again? Yeah, the definition of sound was, it's a longitudinal mechanical wave that happens to traverse in a medium with a particular velocity, having features like amplitude and frequency, which create in the human ear an acoustic sensation like pitch, tone, and timbre. I looked at it and I went, thank you so much, that really helped. Clearly it did not. What I was really looking for is a simple answer to the question. If somebody hits that drum, what happens between hitting that drum and me hearing and going, oh, I just heard a drum. What's going on? So my answer today, the way I think about it is, let's take a drum. Let's imagine there's this big drum in front of us. And now let's ask, okay, somebody beat it. I want you to go ahead and beat it in a moment. Because once you do that, you'll notice that there is air around it. Right? There's air molecules floating around everywhere, balls of air, molecules if you want, and they're going in all directions. For a moment, we're going to just imagine that they're not going everywhere. That's something beautiful about physics. When you're trying to figure out the answer to a question and things are getting really complicated, air's moving everywhere, all that, you know what we do? We pretend like that's not happening. We just say, hey, let's imagine the air is just stationary. No? So let's imagine all those balls of air are stationary, waiting for something to happen, which never happens in the real world. And then you have our ear, the human ear, which is going to listen to this sound. Now I want you to beat that drum, like tap that drum. This is like kind of a video, but it's not. In other words, you can interact with me. So let's tap the drum. So you tap the drum. What did you see? So what you're really doing when you're tapping the drum, in reality, when you hit with the hammer, is you're beginning to stretch that membrane. There's this thick leather-like thing that's stuck there. You're beginning to stretch it in one direction, and you leave it. That's what you're doing really quickly. And then it starts wobbling. It's wobbling really fast. But let's really slow it down and look at just one wobble, right? It wobbles backwards and then comes up. There's air next to it. And the air's just happy. It has no job. It's just like looking around and deciding what to do in life, and it gets hit. And the moment it's hit, it goes and hits the air next to it. That goes and hits the air next to it. So now all of them are wobbling now. And this wobble basically is going from this side all the way there, and somebody there still doesn't know that there is a wobble that's coming towards them. It's like a wave, like a tidal wave that's about to hit them, but they don't know it yet. And we haven't even heard the sound yet, because the wobble is not come anywhere close to us. It keeps going, and finally hits the ear. And now you probably already know this. There is literally a ear drum inside, a drum which has a membrane stretched, not too different from the drum that we hit. And now that drum, air starts hitting that drum, and that drum begins to wobble and shake. And the brain, after this, something happens inside the ear. We can go inside, there's some fluid and things happen, but let's not go there deeply now. And once that starts shaking, the brain goes, oh, it picks it up with nerves and goes, I just heard a drum. And that's all. We didn't have to use any terminology, a lot of jargon. We could just figure out this is what happens. And that's all that happens. Isn't that a great start? Now you have a picture in your mind for, if somebody asks, what is a drum? I mean, if somebody asks, how do I hear a drum when somebody hits it? What's really going on with the sound thing? This is what happens. Now, what I find really interesting here, when I first learned about this, was that there is this wobbling that actually moves, right? It's like you've crowded out air in a small pocket. Just over there, you've created a more crowding. And then that crowding moves. But if you look at a single molecule or ball of air, that's just wobbling around its position. It's not moving from here to there. If you color one of them, say blue, and then you look at it, it won't be like this blue colored ball suddenly found itself there. It's always going to be here. And whenever that happens, when the particles themselves, the matter itself, is not moving too far, but something from far looks as if it's moving. Nothing real is moving. No matter is actually going from this place to that place. Whenever that happens, we say a wave is moving. You probably are familiar with this, right? Because you've seen this so many times. Let's see, a spring. Take a spring. This is like a slinky toy. I don't know if you've played with it. It's super fun to play with. Like, you can keep doing that, and you can let it go down a staircase. So this slinky toy, I want you to now push that, and I think you know what's going to happen. So push it and notice what's going to happen. Did you see that? Just like in the case of air, what you did was you crowded the spring a little bit, right? By pushing. All the spring pieces were happy, But the moment you crowded one side, that crowding, that compression we like to call it, is traveling through the air, and it's traveling through the spring in this case, and going all the way to the end, right? Very similar to what's happening over here. In fact, it's almost exactly the same. A compression travels. But if you color a small piece of that ring, that piece of that spring, right, that single ring is just wobbling. It's not going all the way there. So once again, we would call that a wave on that spring. Now that we've seen a wave on a spring, the next thing to do is like, what other waves can you think of? Think about all the places you've seen this, right? Now the obvious one that might come to you actually will be just throwing a pebble in water and then you see a ripple that's going across. If you go stand, if you're an ant on a leaf and the ripple passes you, you wouldn't be carried by the ripple all the way. You would just bob up and down, right? You just bob up and down, but there's a wave. It looks as if the wave is moving. An easier way to imagine this would be like, nowadays in gyms they have these ropes, right? You get to like, to work out, you get to like pull them and you can see that you raise them and put it down. It's like almost like a chariot. A wave goes, right? Something travels all the way to the end, right? Let's imagine we're doing that. Let's have this rope, lift it up, push it up and see what happens. Once again, predict what you think is going to happen. Nice. What did you see? When you moved it up, what it set off was what looked like something that went from left to right, but each of the particles there were just standing up and sitting down. Almost like if they were people, they were just going yes and sat down. But as you saw, overall it looks like something's moving, right? And that's a wave as well. It's not too different from a Mexican wave. Are you aware of a Mexican wave? It's basically the case where, in a large auditorium, everyone stands up and does this in the right order, and that makes it look like the entire stadium has a wave going through it. But the people themselves are just standing up and sitting down, right? There's no persons going all the way. Once again, a wave. Literally in this case called a Mexican wave.